people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. Savannah Marshall posted this image to her Instagram account with a caption that reads, "Something big is brewing." To which I replied, "A title fight at 175, perhaps? Boxing misses your heavy hands." Savannah Marshall may have lost the fight to Clarissa Shields, but she's still one of the best fighters anywhere at or around these weights, and I would say she's one of the best women boxers in the world. There's no shame in losing to Clarissa. She's one of the best herself. I think boxing needs Savannah Marshall to come back to create the excitement that she creates with those heavy hands and highlight real knockouts.
She's still one of my favorites.
There was talk of her coming back on the undercard of Jonas versus Price, but much to the detriment of Ben Shalom's reputation, they actually had Savannah come down for the kickoff press conference, but they didn't announce a fight for her because they didn't secure one.
Dumbass.
And Ben Shalom's reputation as a capable promoter took a hit as a result. I can only deduce that now that Sky is in fact re-ing up with Boxer, they're going to extend their deal to what is being called a bumper deal. I don't know what that means. That Boxer will continue on the platform. Perhaps Boxer will make more of an effort to bring Savannah Marshall back. She says something big is brewing, but what? So a back and forth exchange between reigning champion Jadeja Green and Clarissa Shields. The announcement of the Taylor versus Serrano trilogy and what's supposed to be on the undercard. Jadeja said, "The funny thing is my team never heard from you or your manager."
She's talking to Clarissa.
Well, we have this event in New York, live on Netflix. Let me know if you were about it or just talk. I can ask Amanda and Nikisa to bless you with the opportunity to make real money and fight me, Clarissa.
What's this got to do with Savannah?
We'll get to that. Clarissa responded by saying, "Let's be clear, Jadeja. You ain't ever made no real money ever. You should fight Franchon Cruz on that card. I'm a main event headliner, something you know nothing about. Move around, clown."
What's this got to do with Savannah?
Well, it doesn't look like Clarissa is receptive to a Jadeja Green fight on the undercard of Taylor versus Serrano 3, so where Clarissa's not receptive to that fight, maybe Savannah Marshall is. And that's what this back and forth exchange between Clarissa and Jadeja might have to do with Savannah, that where Clarissa thinks she's too good to box on that undercard, Savannah, on the other hand, doesn't have as big an ego, and she needs a comeback fight. A big comeback fight, big comeback opportunity. It's been over a year since Savannah Marshall fought.
Jadeja Green is not exactly a tune-up fight.
No, but Savannah did say that big news is coming or something big is brewing, and she used a little phone emoji as if she received the call.
So maybe Amanda and Nikisa and Jake gave Savannah the call that, hey, we wanted to use Clarissa for the show, but she doesn't want to do it. Would you like to stand in?
At this moment, Savannah Marshall is not otherwise spoken for, so I could see that materializing. A Marshall versus Green fight. Savannah is still registered as IBF super middleweight champion, where Jadeja Green now holds the WBO and Franchon Cruz holds the other two alphabet titles. Savannah already beat Franchon, and Franchon already beat Jadeja. But Savannah and Jadeja haven't fought, so that's a fight they might be able to do. A unification match. There is that to consider, but there is also the light heavyweight division and the light heavyweight champions, Che Keneally,
Why are you yelling?
who holds a WBA title, Lonnie Daniels, who's got the IBF. Those are two other potential opponent options for Savannah as well, and I would go with Savannah to beat them both.
Almost anyone is fair game for young Savannah at these weights because she's one of the few fighters at these weights that actually has a major promoter behind her, thus making almost any fight possible. Almost.
What about a Shields rematch?
We talked about that potentiality just the other day, but because Clarissa insists that the second fight has to happen in America, and the second fight being in America,
Who's gonna put up the money? Dimitri Salita? Dimitri's not gonna pay for that fight what Sky Sports and Boxer would pay for that fight. So, it's a stalemate, to where it's not even that Clarissa's demand is outlandish, but it takes money to make money, and Dimitri's only got but so much. That fight is worth more to Sky in the UK than it is to Dimitri in the US.
so it's a stalemate. The rematch between Clarissa and Savannah is now where it was 2 years ago, and that's on the back burner. Thus, Savannah might have to look elsewhere for fights and world title opportunities.
Clarissa is not her only option. She can fight Che Connealy, Lonnie Daniels at light heavyweight. She can fight Jadeja Green at super middle. She needs to come back.
I miss you, Savannah.
We'll see if she does, because there seems to be something coming down the pipeline. We just don't know what it is yet.
Elsewhere in the world of boxing, on the heels of Keith Thurman's big ring return and his big knockout win over Jock Barvis, he had this and that to say about a Tim Tszyu fight.
He said, at the end of the day, I'm open to any contract right now. Tim Tszyu's not finalized. I know it's very easy to say. It's very easy to talk about. He obviously came off of 2 losses. He needs to get a W, right? Tim Tszyu, he needs to go get his W. Okay, so at the end of the day, that's very important. And I can't say without a doubt that if a great contract was to come from me in the United States, that I wouldn't sign it and not really hold interest in Tszyu. In other words, he's non-committal.
But I thought you said that was the plan for Keith Thurman.
It is, but it's no limits plan, and there is little to hold Keith Thurman to it on the predication that someone may offer him something in between now and the time that Tim Tszyu fights Joey Spencer.
The fight ain't done yet, in other words.
But we knew that already. Tim has to make it past Joey for this to become a reality. The reason I'm not really worried about it per se is because this is all on the premise that somebody in America is going to pay big money to Keith Thurman.
Pay him big money to fight who?
Hey, he says that if somebody in America offers him a decent situation in America, he's non-committal to the Tim Tszyu fight. The question then is, who's going to offer him something in America? And for what fight? And depending on what fight that is, would Keith Thurman actually accept it? Because what isn't being said,
The only reason he was willing to travel to Australia is likely because they offered him 7 figures for what was a tune-up fight. That's what Brock Jarvis was, a tune-up fight.
now if what you're expecting is a bigger purse for a bigger situation in America, that will likely involve bigger risks. Say, a Virgil Ortiz fight. Would you be as accepting of a Virgil Ortiz fight if an offer to fight him came across your desk?
Probability of victory is a big part of the decision-making process. Yes, he accepted a Brock Jarvis fight because he knew Brock sucked.
And he might still be accepting of a Tim Tszyu fight because he knows Tim had a horrific year last year. 2 very bad losses that now is an opportune time to fight Tim for a lot of money because No Limit is willing to pay you a lot of money. That's a big fight in Australia. It's a pay-per-view.
And Tim looks beatable now.
And if the potentiality of a big offer in America is all that stands in the way between Keith and this fight, who's going to make the offer in America? For what fight, what opponent, and would Keith accept it? Because the potentiality of victory is just as much a factor as the money.
Is the rest of it.
Keith ain't stupid now. He figures he can take his talents on the road, where the fighters are perhaps not as challenging as they are at home. He can make some coin in what are winnable situations, more winnable at least than what's waiting for him back home.
You want big money at home? That's going to involve big risks that at your age, you perhaps don't want to take.
So when he says that he's non-committal to a Tim Tszyu fight based on the potentiality of a big offer in America, the question is, who's going to make it, for what fight, and would Keith Thurman take it?
You had a big win over a not-so-big name somewhere else in the world. Congratulations, but you're not all the way back yet, and not where you can start making big demands. If you want to get there, you got to complete this process. You beat Brock, Now you have to beat Tim. If you can,
Then you're cooking with rice. Then I'd say, okay, this guy's back.
saying more. Keith Thurman is sort of putting the cart before the horse. You gotta complete this.
I think so. He may sound non-committal, but that's all on the premise that somebody else comes along and offers him something substantial. And I don't see anybody doing that yet, at least not for a fight that I think Keith would take on. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, applying for a British boxing license allows Conor Benn to leave the past at the door.
At least according to Eddie Hearn, ahead of what is his big showdown with Chris Eubank Jr. that's getting a lot of attention across the pond.
Eddie Hearn envisages there being no issue with Conor Benn being licensed by the British Boxing Board of Control ahead of his fight with Chris Eubank Jr. on April 26th. Late next month, having relinquished his license way back there in 2023, Benn seems set to reapply to the board and to box under a British license once more. Benn's past 2 fights have been in America, where they're a lot more freewheeling when it comes to doping and what punishments should go out.
The suspensions don't last anywhere near as long.
Where he has boxed with a license from the Texas State Athletic Commission, and they came after he twice submitted samples that contained adverse findings for clomiphene ahead of when the fight with Eubank was first scheduled to go down. Despite the efforts of organizers to proceed with the show, it was pulled at the 11th hour, but it has since been rescheduled and is bigger than ever, contributing to more than 60,000 tickets being sold for their fight at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium.
Eddie Hearn expects the process of Benn again being licensed by the board to prove pretty straightforward. He also said that through the fight's promotional tour, during which Eubank slapped an egg on his face in Manchester before a final face-off at Tottenham, Hearn and Robert Smith, the board's general secretary, spent time discussing the issue.
What's the big deal? He's promoting the fight.
Once the 35-year-old Eubank shoved that egg into Conor Benn's face, Smith called Hearn ahead of the second face-off.
One of the blessings of the last 3 days was I got a chance to talk to Robert Smith because obviously Robert called me after and said, listen, what's the plan for Thursday? Because we can't have this again to promote a top boxing scene. I said, no, you're right. Look, we're going to have security between them. They will not be able to get anywhere near each other. And he was like, I really feel like he should apply to us. I really feel like any British fighter that fights in this country should have a British Boxing Board of Control license, which I have said in every interview. Then I called Conor after my conversation with Robert and I said, listen, Conor is a bit of a hothead.
You think?
Benn, 28, has maintained his innocence throughout, and he has also vigorously asserted that his treatment has been different from other fighters who failed drug tests. But Hearn has advised him to reapply for his license with the British Boxing Board of Control and move on. I said to him, look, I have to be honest with you, as your promoter and your mate, I really think you should apply for your British Boxing Board of Control license, Hearn said. I'm not doing my job if I don't give you my honest opinion. You won, right? And it ain't a case of who won and who lost, but the reality is, you've had your hearing, it's over. You should be fighting under a British Boxing Board of Control license. And to be honest with you, I think it's a good look. If you're not, I know the media will never stop asking questions. You've got to be bigger than that sometimes, and it's never going to stop the questions.
Hasn't stopped Victor Conte from bumping his gums.
But it's going to say, look, we're moving forward. And the board are acknowledging that. Hearn said Benn's ego was stopping him from applying, but he was confident the situation would be resolved, and he believes that this will be the end of the matter that has for 2 years dominated chatter about performance-enhancing drugs in boxing. The NADP, the National Anti-Doping Panel, who have cleared Benn to fight, and UKAD, the UK Anti-Doping Panel, will no longer stand in Benn's way. I just think as well, for Conor, it's kind of like the final little leave at the door. It's over, said Hearn.
Conor believes that he's been treated differently from other fighters that found themselves in that exact same situation, and I happen to agree with him because we see fighters test positive for banned substances all the time. All the while that this situation has been going on with Conor, Ryan's situation.
That's been going on parallel to Conor's, yet in some people's minds, Ryan is innocent. What determines whose story you believe and whose story you don't? Why is Ryan innocent, but Conor's persecuted?
Why is this different from Tyson Fury testing positive for nandrolone years ago? Or Canelo for Clenbo, Oscar?
Oscar Valdez for whatever he tested positive for that. This happens enough with some regularity that the energy they give Conor's situation is almost disproportionate. Look at Victor Conte, for example. He's still writing love letters. This guy's still writing lengthy paragraphs about Conor Benn.
Get a whiff.
Victor said to the doctor that Conor Benn should come forward and do an interview to clarify the following. A former client of Dr. Shahad's told Boxing Scene that the doctor was a TRT specialist and said that clomiphene was widely prescribed to him and others by Sajad. The client, who said he received clomiphene because he had low T levels that affected his mood and overall health, claimed the doctor used a WhatsApp group with more than 150 people in which he would instruct patients on how to inject and how much to use while sharing other information. He prescribes everybody clomiphene, said the client. The majority of the group are in on it. There's 152 in the group, and there is more than that on clomiphene.
That's what Conor tested positive for.
One of Sayad's clients was Dennis McCann, who recently tested positive for drostanolone, trenbolone, and 19-norendrosterone. Why has Conor and Eddie not addressed the above?
Because it's hearsay?
Because when Dennis McCann eats, Conor Benn and Eddie don't shit. Victor continued, all they can repeatedly say is cleared, cleared, cleared. But this is not an adequate response to the many questions that still exist. Dr. Sayad has not explained why he was giving 100 boxers clomiphene. Is this doctor a more likely source of the Conor Benn exposure to clomiphene and reason for the two positive test results? Why do UK boxing scribes not repeatedly ask Conor and Eddie to address the above?
Because it's been 2 years, Victor, and here's a newsflash for you, in case you didn't realize it while you're writing these love letters. People in boxing don't actually care that much.
For all of the questions and suspicions that you may be raising, let's just say that Conor was doping, that he's just as guilty as he looks to you. At the very most, that puts him in the same company as Tyson Fury, Canelo Alvarez, Mauricio Lara, who just got banned for 2 years by the BBBofC,
Oscar Valdez, Alexander Povetkin, Jarrell Miller, Dillian Veit,
Hannah Gabriels, Heather Hardy, Erica Cruz,
Ray Vargas, Alberto Puello.
a lot of other boxers. A lot of other boxers who you don't even give this time and attention to.
Many of these boxers, after their doping cases were settled, were allowed to resume their careers. Now Conor is resuming his.
It's been 2 years. What do you want they should do? Nail him to a cross and erect it in front of Parliament? It's done, Victor.
The fight is on. Get over it!
And before you go criticizing the BBBOC and UCAD, need I remind you that the punishments they dispense for doping in the sport of boxing are a lot more harsh and a lot more lengthy than what we see in America.
Nobody in America is in any position to talk. This country has more of a revolving door policy when it comes to peds than the UK, so just stop.
Enough already.
With the pearl clutching and the virtue signaling, people want to see this fight. You know why? Because they don't actually care that much. And neither does Chris Eubank Jr., because if he did, he would have stood on principle and he wouldn't have accepted this fight. Nobody in boxing is that altruistic.